Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here on NBC Sports. Dave Burns along with Nate Ryan, fresh off of our Rolex 24 preview, the Roar Sports Cars. We're excited about that in 2019, IMSA on NBC. But we're here today to talk about the biggest news in the NASCAR world, which is finally, Nate, after a long wait, we understand what was rumored for so long. Daniel Suarez is in the 41 car for Stewart-Haas Racing. Why did it take so long, and ultimately, why did this deal come together for Daniel?
Well, I think you can answer that question pretty much the same way, Dave. Sponsorship, obviously, is the key to any driver getting a ride, and we learned today that in taking over the number 41 at Stewart-Haas Racing, Daniel Suarez will have Eris, which has sponsored him the last few years at Joe Gibbs Racing. They're coming over with him. Also being sponsored by co-owner Gene Haas's CNC automation as well on that car. So I think it was all about getting things buttoned up with Eris, with Gene Haas, and with Daniel Suarez. And that's why, as you said, Dave, I mean, this was a deal we started hearing about a couple of months ago. Finally came to fruition today. When
I talked to Daniel, I told him I felt a little bit bad because he had to keep everything on the DL. And at some points, too, he didn't know. I know you're going to do some podcasting and some writing about your conversation with Daniel, but can you give us a little preview on maybe how difficult it was for him at times late last year before he knew what was happening?
Yeah, I just spoke with Daniel, and he was talking about that he was in a really dark place for about a month of last season after he found out that he wasn't going to be driving the number 18 in the future, Martin Truex Jr., the 2017 Cup Series champion, of course, coming over to Gibbs Racing and taking Daniel's ride. Daniel said he didn't really have a lot of knowledge going in to that situation ahead of time, and he learned about it virtually when everybody else did. So as he put it, for about a month he was kind of an angry person, and I think feeling like, hey, what's going to happen here? And I did all this work to get to NASCAR's Premier Series. Will I be able to stay? And fortunately for him, after that month passed and things started falling into place, that was what led him here to Stewart-Haas Racing, where he got named the driver of the 41 today.
And how unusual is it for a driver, especially with Daniel's relative lack of experience at the Cup level, to make a lateral move at such a high level? I mean, from Joe Gibbs Racing to Stewart-Haas Racing, that's pretty big.
Well, you know what, Dave, it does seem unusual, but there is a template here, and it's right there in a Stewart-Haas Racing teammate for Daniel Suarez and Aric Almirola. He, of course, came over to drive the number 10 car last year and became a winner, instant playoff contender, reached the third round. So I think for Daniel Suarez, it is a little bit unique to go from one powerhouse NASCAR Cup team in Joe Gibbs Racing to another in Stewart-Haas Racing, but I think his expectations are very high. I think he thinks that the 2019 rules package will help him. He mentioned the All-Star race and the Pocono race last year as races in which he felt like he did well. So I think Daniel Suarez looks at his teammate at Stewart-Haas Racing now in Aric Almirola and thinks, the season Almirola had last year in 2018, winning and then making the playoffs, that could be something that could happen for Daniel Suarez, maybe getting that first Cup win here in his third season in 2019.
Daniel's celebrating his 27th birthday, Nate, so he's the youngest of that group. Where does he fit in driver-wise there, and how does he help Stewart-Haas Racing as he joins them?
Well, as you mentioned, Dave, he is the youngest. He lowers the average age of Stewart-Haas Racing by a little bit, in that you have Kevin Harvick, who's in his 40s, and Clint Bowyer in his late 30s, and then you have Aric Almirola, who's 34. So Daniel Suarez comes in about 7 years behind the current youngest driver at Stewart-Haas Racing. So in terms of experience, obviously he's got less than the rest of those guys, but I'm sure he comes in with a lot of vibrancy. I certainly saw that in your interview, a lot of positive enthusiasm. I know people have always said they like being around Daniel Suarez because he's got this effervescence to him that I think lifts everybody up. So I think he'll bring certainly a lot in terms of positive attitude, and I think he'll be leaning on those Stewart-Haas Racing teammates for probably some experience as he moves from Toyota to driving a Ford now in Cup.
And upside for the company, obviously, is his age. Now you've got Cole Custer coming through as well, and Daniel is kind of then part of the future, you would think.
Yeah. There was a lot of chatter, I think, about Cole Custer, who, of course, made the championship round of the XFINITY Series last year, and would he be ready for a Cup move? He wasn't, but certainly I think this solidifies things a little bit for Stewart-Haas Racing. They get Daniel Suarez here. in 2019, and I think Cole Custer remains in the pipeline. And of course, Chase Briscoe also moving in the Xfinity Series full-time this year as well for Stewart-Haas Racing. So a lot of driver development going on, but at the same time, you look at the season that Stewart-Haas Racing had in Cup with its 4 drivers last year, all of them making the final 8, and of course, Kevin Harvick making the championship round, all of them being winners last year. A lot of good things happening for that team.
You touched on something I want to ask you about. Drivers coming from one brand to another. We've heard of experiences where late in the seasons they'll be asked not to attend competition meetings anymore because the latest, greatest secrets are being shared and they don't want them in there. What's it like these days for an organization like Ford and Stewart-Haas to get a driver so fresh off of Toyota and Joe Gibbs Racing?
I mean, I think that could only help, Dave. And while you're right, I think that when you are in that lame duck driver situation, perhaps some of the trade secrets are kept from you. Certainly, Daniel Suarez was a big part of the Toyota organization over the last few years, not just in Cup, but in the Xfinity Series. Again, drove for Joe Gibbs Racing 2 years in Cup and spent a lot of time with some of the drivers who are Ford's chief rivals, and Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch. And I'm sure that he's going to bring some knowledge to this camp that they'll probably be able to use.
All right. Anything else strike you about today's announcement or your conversation with Daniel?
Just that I think there is definitely a weight off of his shoulders. And you noticed it too, just that positivity and that fresh attitude. I think we all kind of felt for him last year because when he moved up to Cup, he was thrust into that position because of Carl Edwards leaving NASCAR. And unfortunately, he kind of left that ride at Joe Gibbs Racing in the same way, just in an unceremonious way, and that it sort of was just thrust upon him. So I think this is a feel-good story, Dave, right? I mean, it's good to see a guy like Daniel Suarez land a ride and get a chance to keep things going here in Cup in his 3rd season. Yeah,
we asked him if he had a good Christmas, if he'd gotten some time at home. And he loves his family, but he said a little too much. And that's just because he's a racer and he's ready to go in 2019, now announced to drive the 41 for Stewart-Haas Racing.
Hey, NASCAR fans. Thanks for checking out the NBC Sports YouTube channel. Make sure you hit subscribe below for the latest NASCAR news, race highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.